You are listening to the Nightline Sports Network, brought to you by Travis Dever and the Dever team, 386-690-1636.
Welcome to the AAC Report, only on the Nightline Sports Network. I'm Jeff Allen. Coming up, we will continue our football team-by-team previews. Dustin and Sam from the Scott and Holman Pawdcast be here to give us the lowdown on the Houston Cougars. And Corey Gloor, the play-by-play man for the Tulane Green Wave, will be along to give us a preview of what's going on for Tulane in 2021. Before we get to that, the AAC's Women's Soccer Weekly Awards were given out. For week number 1, the Offensive Player of the Week, Saorla Miller of Memphis. She had a hat trick in the Tigers' 4-0 win against Southeast Missouri State last Thursday. Her teammate, Kimberly Smith, is the Defensive Player of the Week, as she helped their crew hold Ole Miss to just 7 shots and 1 goal in a 1-1 double overtime draw on Sunday. The goalkeeper of the week is Carolyn Delisle of UCF, posting a season-opening shutout against Texas last week. And the rookie of the week is South Florida's Madeline Penman-Durstein, recorded 5 shots in her opening weekend with the Bulls, including the game-winning goal against in-state rival Florida, easy for me to say, last week as well. Dustin and Sam are in the virtual green room, and they're up next to preview the Houston Cougars. They are from the Scott and Holman Pawdcast, and join us when the AAC report continues after this.
Hey, this is Travis Dever, Kai's Real Estate, the Dever team, New Smyrna Beach. Your source for real estate and everything else, New Smyrna Beach. Proud sponsor of Nightline. Call me anytime at 386-690-1636. That's 386-690-1636. Let me show you my hometown, New Smyrna Beach, UCF's favorite beach. Go Knights and charge on.
An auto accident can change your life forever. At Chad Barr Law, we are raising the bar on what to expect from your personal injury attorney. Hi, I'm Chad Barr, and I want you to know that our entire team is dedicated to providing you with the representation you deserve in your greatest time of need. If you or a loved one have been injured in an auto accident, call 407-599-9036 for a free consultation or visit chadbarlaw.com. At Chad Barr Law, our clients come to us in need and leave as family. Offices, Altamont Springs.
Looking for more out of your Porsche? Look no further than Flat6Motorsports.com. They have the widest selection of aftermarket Porsche parts anywhere in the world. With over 85 product lines and in-depth expertise, Flat6Motorsports.com is your one-stop shop for any Porsche performance needs. Whether you're shopping for intakes, exhausts, suspension, or tuning, they have you covered. Flat6Motorsports.com is the premier Porsche aftermarket specialist. Check them out at Flat6Motorsports.com.
As we continue our team-by-team previews, time now to take a look at the Houston Cougars. Dustin and Sam from the Scott and Holman Pawdcast are here to do just that. Guys, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, always great to talk to you, Jeff.
Well, I'll tell you what, guys, as we look towards this 2021 season, it'll be the third year for Dana Holgerson. So far, 3-5 overall last year, 7-13. What do you think? Is this a year that's kind of a make or break situation for him, or is last year, because of all the COVID snafus? I mean, you guys probably got affected more by other teams being, shelving your games and rescheduling and all that good stuff. Is there a pass from last year?
So I think to some extent you get a pass for last year because you kind of alluded to it. There was just a lot of COVID shenanigans going on here. I think everybody dealt with it to some degree, so you can't use that as an excuse because anyone that tried to play football during the fall of 2020 dealt with it in some way. But I think you correctly pointed out, U of H dealt with a lot of issues at the start of the season. You had 5 games get canceled in September alone, if you include Rice and Washington State, who both postponed their start of the seasons and ultimately completely canceled their games with U of H. I mean, U of H was in fall camp from early August of last year to early October of last year. I don't know if any of these guys have probably ever before, and certainly I'm sure they hope since, have dealt with a 2-month fall camp. And I think in addition to that, you basically got 2.5-ish games of U of H at full health. You lost Marquez Stevenson in the middle of the season, didn't get him back until the last regular season game against Memphis, and even that game, it was pretty clear that he was playing at about 50-60%. You lost Peyton Turner for an extended period of time, who ended up being a first-round pick of the Saints. And I think as importantly as those two critical losses, you had an offensive line that I think was probably the weakest unit on both sides of the ball just get turned into an absolute mash unit for the second year in a row. And no matter the receiver talent or running back talent or quarterback talent, if you have instability at offensive line, if you lack talent at offensive line, and I think U of H probably checked both those boxes, it really limits what you can do. We're going to be recording our offensive preview this week, and I did a look back at U of H's bowl game, and when I think about negativity about last season, when I think about moments where I really thought, I'm not sure this is working, I looked at who started offensive line in that bowl game, and it was basically, if at most, I would say one of those guys should be starting this year. So it was a very weird season, but I think to circle back to your original question, it definitely is a year where U of H fans need to see proof of concept, need to see something like we were, told was going to come when Dana Holgorsen got here. I think the defense certainly looks promising. I think we'll probably get into the specifics of that more later, but you need to see some proof of concept. You certainly need to see some proof of concept on offense where, we've been told Dana Holgorsen, and we've seen it, going back a ways when he was the offensive coordinator here, is this great offensive mind. So I think it's not a championship or bust kind of season. I really do think this is kind of Cincinnati's league this year, but it is put a good record up because this is a friendly schedule. It's put a good record up because it's year 3 and you can no longer make excuses about needing to get your guys in, about COVID, things like that. So not championship or bust, but certainly 8 or 9 wins and among the top several teams in the AAC or bust.
Justin?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's fair to give Holgorsen a year 0 for 2019, and just given the state of the roster that he inherited, and given the eventual decision to redshirt a bunch of guys. And I think it's okay to kind of give him a second year 0 for last year for a lot of the reasons that Sam has mentioned. But this is a school with very high expectations in football, and they've taken 2 pretty ugly years in a row under this coaching staff. And I think everyone community wide, the fans, the administration, the coaching staff, the players, everybody is ready to actually have a year this year where you kind of remember, oh yeah, the University of Houston can be good at football. The University of Houston is spending more on its assistant, on its coaching pool generally than any other school, at this level. There should be some results, that go along with that. You should be, again, I would agree with Sam. I don't think it's any reasonable fan is going, oh yes, Houston is going to unseat Cincinnati as the king of the American this year. But like Sam said, it should be proof of concept. It should be, 8 or 9 wins at the very least, I think, given what's coming back and given, frankly, the schedule that Houston is facing.
Let's talk about the quarterback position. One of the things Houston has that some of the schools this year don't have is at least an established player at the position. He took over in 2019 when De'Ara King left, and kind of got thrown in there a little bit, but he certainly took his lumps, and he definitely showed a lot of fortitude and everything. He certainly has some nice running ability and things like that, and the offense scores points. Do you think he's now ready to take that next step?
Yeah, I think it's Clayton Tune's time for sure, and it's been pretty interesting that he is, it's not easy to forget this, but he actually dates back to the previous coaching staff. Dana Holgorsen didn't bring him in. So it is, I think, very telling in how much Holgorsen believes in Clayton Tune's abilities that in the years that he's been here now into his 3rd year in the program, he has not hit the transfer portal looking for anyone to seriously contend with Clayton Tune for the starting job. And I don't think the fan base would have hugely turned on him had he done so. I think everyone has seen that Tune has shown some really good things and has had some issues as well. So the fact that he's sticking with them, and not only that, but he in a recent media availability, Coach Holgorsen, he's like, well, it's my 3rd year coaching this guy up, so if he's not a very good quarterback this year, then I must not be a very good coach. So Holgorsen has pulled no punches, is not exactly trying to dampen expectations for what Clayton Tune can do this year. So, it goes back to Sam's previous point about the offensive line as well, though. And Holgorsen has acknowledged that as well, that it's, I think the progression of the offensive line and the progression of Clayton Tune are going to go hand in hand. And I feel like a broken record because I think we've said that, probably verbatim in just about every game leading into the previous season. But yeah, I mean, that's the $1 million question. A lot of the advanced metrics that I've seen actually rate Clayton Tune very highly when he has a clean pocket to throw out of, but he's just been in too many situations where that's not been the case and not always made the best decision when the pocket has broken down. So yeah, I think that it's one of those things where it could be a tipping point type thing where if the offensive line puts together just enough of a pocket that Clayton Tune is actually more relaxed than he's been up until this point. And then if Clayton Tune makes, 5% better decisions, whatever it is, than he was the last couple of years when he was playing more football games earlier than maybe would have been ideal for his development. I think if those two things come together, we could end up seeing all first or second team type conference type of season for Clayton Tune potentially.
And the only thing I would add, and Dustin kind of touched on already with him, it's decision making. There's been a lot of stuff outside of Clayton Tune's control. He hasn't gotten, I would say, anything close to good or consistent offensive line play the last 2 seasons, but it's decision making. We've seen him at his best. You mentioned it at the top, Jeff. He's, I think, one of the more underrated guys in terms of what he can do with his legs. He's not De'Aaron King or Greg Ward, but he is absolutely the kind of dual threat that opposing defensive coordinators have to account for. Clayton Tune running the ball, Clayton Tune being able to improvise, and Holgorsen has that in his arsenal that he can use Clayton Tune on, zone read, for example, and that it's not a situation where the defense is going to just play the halfback the entire time. Clayton Tune can absolutely punish you with his legs. It's getting the bad decisions ironed out. Is he going to be 100% perfect? Is every throw or every decision he makes going to be the right one? No, because that's very, very, very few, if any, quarterbacks out there. But, just getting the stuff he can't control around him, really offensive line play chief among them, is important. But even when he has time, cutting out some of the kind of inexplicable decisions we've seen, in the 2019 and 2020 seasons, which I don't think it's at the level where you question whether this guy has it to be a Division I starting quarterback. But if I have criticisms of Clayton Tune, I think chief among it is decision making. It's not toughness, it's not raw ability, but decision making at times has been shaky.
Yeah, and as we all know, decision making and cutting down turnovers always leads to success if you put those things together. That's for sure. As far as the guys he throws the ball to, now obviously Marquez Stevenson has moved on. You've had a couple guys transfer out, but you got reinforcements coming in on the transfer portal. Guys like Keyshawn Carter from Texas Tech and Jalen Irwin from UCLA.
Yeah, I think that was actually an area that Holgorsen was pretty critical of. They actually made a change at receiver coach. After spring ball, they promoted from within Dakeil Shorts, who had been on staff as an off-field guy and actually played for Holgorsen previously at West Virginia, is now the Cougars receivers coach, at least for this season. And it is kind of a question mark. I wouldn't put it a question mark in the same way I would offensive line, but Tank Dell, a guy who came from Independence Community College last year, really had a breakout, I would say, first year on campus, first real extended look against Division I competition. And, I thought with a very kind of hit or miss passing game last year, put up some nice numbers, showed an ability against some good defenses to make plays. And I think now you potentially have 3 more years of eligibility because of the 2020 pause. And that's a really exciting thought with him. And some of the transfers you mentioned, Keyshawn Carter, a guy from Texas Tech, who the staff's really talked up his ability as a burner, a guy who's a real good athlete, and I think was in a Texas Tech offense that really, really, really struggled to do anything vertically, which for all the flaws of U of H's offense, Holgorsen's shown a pretty consistent commitment to be vertical, to let Clayton Tune use his arm. And I think Keyshawn Carter, a guy with a pretty good amount of Big 12 snaps under his belt, I think will benefit from that. And Jalen Irwin, like you said, from UCLA, and a guy who was a pretty, I think, critical a guy they kept around who actually looked like he was going to transfer out was Jeremy Singleton, someone the staff gave an extended look to in the 2019 season when Keith Corbin redshirted ahead of him, and he got a lot more reps that he might not have otherwise that season. And just, I think health and COVID just really wasn't able to get anything consistently going last year. But I think that he's stuck with this program, that he chose to stick around, I think is pretty critical. And I think I would be very surprised if he's not one of the 3 or 4 starting receivers we see week 1 against Texas Tech. And not a receiver, but Christian Trahan, the tight end. When anyone ever asks me who is the somewhat overlooked guy who I think could play a critical role in this year's Cougar offense, it's Christian Trahan, the Cougars starting tight end, who Holgorsen and the staff have just been effusive about really since the moment they got on campus.
Yeah, I was going to say Sam did a pretty good breakdown of that. I also expect Christian Trahan to have a really big year. But wide receiver is a position that Holgorsen has not pulled any punches, and being willing to say that position isn't living up, isn't guys weren't earning their scholarships and that kind of thing. So it is a position that I think there's lots of jobs up for grabs, and Sam kind of hit some of the main contenders, but I think every receiver on this roster right now knows has been knowing through spring ball and heading into fall camp, hey, this is my chance to step up and show something, because there aren't a lot of guys that have just other than Tank Dell probably really I think nailed down a starting spot heading into the season.
As far as the guys who are going to be toting the rock in the backfield, what do you see in that position group?
Yeah, it's another Texas Tech transfer coming in Tazon Henry at running back, who has showed some really good things for the Red Raiders. Someone who we were really excited about. He was that last crop of guys that had to sit out for a season, but he's coming in and will be eligible this year. And you also got Mulbacar coming back as well, another 5th or 6th year super senior. I forget who's been in this program. It just feels for quite some time. And he's someone that I think the fans have kind of come to love as kind of the bowling ball type of, hard to bring down, runner that's going to, run through defenders rather than around them. So I think those 2 guys are probably the main 2. And then someone that is maybe to keep an eye out for would be Alton Mccaskill, who's a true freshman coming in. Maybe I think is one of, if not the highest rated guys in Houston's high school class this year, and has already been drawing some pretty positive reviews. So I think with the couple of upperclassmen guys that I just mentioned in front of him, he might not be the starter this year, but I think is probably they're gonna find some ways to get him the ball, and will be someone to watch for years to come.
I think the only thing I would add is with Mulbacar, he's really shown great stuff in flashes. A couple games come to mind against actually both of the Florida AAC teams. He was the starter in that crazy 2017 De'Aaron King comeback game in Tampa against South Florida, and put up great numbers in that one against what was a really good USF defense that year. And in 2019 at UCF against, I think, one of the more underrated in recent memory defenses in this conference, that 2019 UCF defense. I don't think they were at the time they'd allowed more than 100 yards from a back in a game. And Mulbacar had something like, I think, 120 something yards at the half in Orlando in a year where he was deliberately being held to 4 games as part of the staff's redshirting plan, and just someone the staff really wanted to see for 2020, probably a 2020 season where a pandemic doesn't happen. But I think with him, it's just been staying healthy. I pointed out a couple of really good games, but I think that physical style and just some bad luck on the injury side, I think, has kept him from really putting together a full season. But what you've seen from individual games, it's really exciting. I think the thunder and lightning combo potentially of Tazon Henry, who Dustin mentioned, and Mulbacar, it's really exciting. I think U of H could go 3 or 4 deep at the position. Holgorsen's talked about, not wanting to have a bell cow running back per se, wanting to use a lot of guys, wanting to use several different guys in the running game. So I think we'll see all 3 guys Dustin mentioned, and maybe even, other guys like Chandler Smith, another super senior, getting carries this year.
And of course, you've touched on the offensive line already, and a lot of it's going to be key upon them. I believe it's 4 of the 5 starters are back. So at least if one thing, they've gotten some experience under the belt. So again, an opportunity for them to take the next step.
Yeah, one really critical addition. I think if you went back through Dustin and I's messages to each other during that just awful New Mexico Bowl that was held in Texas against Hawaii, one of the things we talked about was just this Cougar offensive line was screaming for a guy to come in, a grad transfer, either an FCS All-American or a guy who was consistently, an all-conference guy, maybe a lower conference, Sun Belt, Conference USA, MAC. And then lo and behold, a month or 2 into the offseason, the Cougars got 4-year starting Louisiana Tech center Cody Russi, who has already since been voted team captain by his peers, despite being in the program only since the spring, and a guy who I think gives the Cougs a real needed oomph in the middle. I think offensive line generally was a struggle, but you could probably maybe look at the tackle position and say, yeah, they've got Patrick Paul, a third-year freshman because of the COVID pause, who looks real promising. He has the body type of a guy who could be playing on Sundays, and Dennis Bardwell, who's been in the program at right tackle a while. But in the middle, it was kind of a rotating cast of guys, and no one really stood out in a positive way. And I think Cody Russi gives you an answer there that you wouldn't have had if you had just brought back all these guys and the incoming freshmen. I think he really is going to be a critical add for U of H. I would say the most critical addition, and U of H made a number of Division I, transfer additions in the last couple cycles. I would say easily the most critical one was bringing in Cody Russi. And now you do have, I think, broadly a pretty good amount of cumulative experience just because you've had to play a lot of guys, just because you've had to look at a number of different combinations of guys. But I think just the stability that Cody Russi brings, it's absolutely huge. I think a lot of what's kind of a growing optimism for me in this offense, I think, stems from having a guy like that. I think just bring the stability of a guy who was a 4-year starter at this level, and you can't beat that kind of experience.
Yeah, the only thing that I would really add to what Sam said was to highlight something that he said earlier on, which was to talk about what a mash unit this offensive line has been for the last couple of years. And while you always go into every season expecting you're going to see an injury or two on your offensive line, Houston has, just really taken more than its fair share of injuries at that position 2 years running. And it certainly feels like the universe should tilt the other way for a year. Maybe just go a little easy on us on the offensive line injuries. That would certainly be helpful. I think I'm as excited about the front, the starting five as I've been in the last few years or for the offensive line. But the depth is still a little bit more of a question mark. So like the guys up front that Sam mentioned, but it does all kind of depend on the huge question mark. Do we actually get fair to decent amount of injuries this year? And keeping my fingers crossed for sure.
Just wanted to add also, like the 2018 season, Applewhite's last season, we had, I think, 6 total offensive linemen start that season. So very lucky. You only need to start two combinations, I think, of guys over a 13-game season. I don't know if Holgerson's had the same combination of 5 offensive line starters 3 games in a row in 20 games of being here. That's how bad it's been the last couple of years.
Yeah, hard to get consistency when you got that kind of turnover, that's for sure. So on the defensive side of the ball, we've got a lot of experience on that side, maybe giving up more points per game than you probably would like to see. Your defensive backfield, I guess all, the good news is they can tackle. I guess the bad news is you don't want them all near the top of the stat sheet on that particular category. Let's talk about the defensive backfield first.
Yeah, there's definitely, and like you mentioned, had a lot of safeties really high on the team tackle charts this year, and maybe you'd like to see more linebackers in that category heading into next season. But there's definitely, and this is going to be a theme talking about the defense, just a crazy amount of experience and a lot of veteran guys with a lot of college games under their belt coming into the season. And you look at the safety position, and there's 5 guys that have a fair amount of starting position. Or starting experience, I should say, on their resume at this point. And so it's one of those, it's hard to know who is going to end up starting. It's probably the safety position, I would say, would be the hardest to predict what the 2 deep is going to look like when the season starts at this point. But I think one of the few kind of positive surprises from the defense last year was a safety named Hassan Hippolyte, who was a transfer, had only played 1 game at Colorado. And was a redshirt freshman last year and ended up getting a bigger role than I probably would have predicted. And I thought, took to the position as a young guy as well as could have been expected. So he'd probably be my guess for one of the 2 safety positions. But like I said, a lot of guys back there, even with a 3-year starter at safety and Deontay Anderson moving to linebacker, still just a ton of safety experience. And then the other, secondary position, the cornerbacks, is where I think Houston is really probably as excited about any position on the field as probably as they are at cornerback, with 2 guys coming back into Marion Williams and Marcus Jones, who have just been, progressively getting better. Marion Marion Williams was a first-team JUCO All-American who the staff flipped from SMU right when they first arrived on campus, and he's been, one of the bright spots on this defense for the last couple of years. And then Marcus Jones, the Troy transfer, in addition to being maybe the most electric return man in college football, is a pretty good defensive back. I think it was fourth-team All-American by Pro Football Focus as a cornerback last year. So those two guys, I think in combination, are going to give Houston a pretty good cornerback group. And then the safeties, I think it's, it is a lot of it is hoping to see some starting experience turn into increased production. But the one thing we can at least say is that they're not, like I said, they're not going to be hurting on trying to find some experienced guys to put on the two deep.
When Dustin and I previewed the defense in our last episode, we listed off, I think it was 5 guys with starting experience or significant, snaps that are competing for 2 spots, which is a kind of depth that we didn't even come close to having when the staff first got here. I think in total, when the Holgorsen staff got here, there were, including cornerbacks and safeties, 2 or 3 defensive backs who had anything close to meaningful divisional experience. I think the last couple staffs, both the Herman and Applewhite staff, left the cupboard pretty bare defensively. Not totally bare. Guys like Grant Stewart and Peyton Turner who turned into excellent college players, but just not anything close to the depth you need to have a decent defense in this league. And I think at worst, that's what you have this year is a solid, pretty deep group of guys at both the cornerback and safety positions. My insane belief about last season is that U of H would have beaten BYU had Marcus Jones been healthy for that game. That was the one game Marcus Jones missed the entire 2020 season. It just so happened to be up against BYU in a game where the Cougs absolutely had the BYU team on the ropes going into the fourth quarter. I think having an experienced guy like Jones would have helped there, but certainly having Jones and Marion Williams, who Dustin talked about in depth, as a 1-2 is probably the best cornerback combo U of H has had since 2016. So it's been a little bit.
And talking about the guys in front of them in both the defensive line and the linebacking core.
I don't think either of us could be more excited about this defensive front. This is as deep of a defensive line as U of H has had in a good long while, certainly since the 2015 and 2016 seasons. I think if U of H hadn't brought in anyone new, I still think this would be a pretty stellar group, even with the loss of Peyton Turner, a guy who was a very, very, very gifted pass rusher, first round pick of the Saints. Logan Hall, listed the 6'6" defensive tackle, played a lot his first 3 years, at least the first couple years. It was more of a by necessity thing. You obviously really don't like to be having redshirt freshmen and freshmen getting a lot of reps on your defensive line, but we just had so few buys the position that Logan Hall was getting a lot of reps. And anytime anyone talks to, defensive players from U of H, coaches, Holgorsen in this offseason, Logan Hall has been one of the very first things I talked about, just talking about what an athletic freak he is, which we've kind of always known, but that it's now translating to a 4th-year guy who's a real good defensive lineman. And Dustin will, I think, text me angrily if in the next 30 seconds I don't mention Latrell Bankston, who Iowa State transfer, a guy who played a ton for a really good Iowa State defense this past year. And I think we were delighted to see he joins U of H with potentially 2 years of eligibility, a guy who I think, what was it, Dustin? He had 2 sacks of Sam Ehlinger.
Yep, 2 sacks, one Big 12 Defensive Player of the Week.
Yeah, and in their win in Austin against that school there, and just a guy working with our defensive line coach, Brian Early, someone Dustin and I are also very high on, a guy who came from Arkansas State, where, he turned a number of guys who were below the radar high school and JUCO recruits into, great pass rushers. And I think we've seen the same effect here. I think Peyton Turner being the most prominent example, and just a number of other guys with starting experience, David Anini, Derek Parrish, Cedric Williams, this guy who came in before last offseason, opted out of the 2020 season because of his own COVID scare, but was the conference player of the year in the Southwest Junior College Conference, which is all the Texas JUCOs. So just a number of guys, far more guys in the defensive line than you have starting spots. It's not a question of who's your starting, or do you have enough guys to have a quality starting force on the front. It's which combination of 4 guys is the staff going to end up choosing. And linebacker is just so much experience there. I think one of the most overlooked losses from last year's U of H team, I haven't mentioned him to this point, is Donovan Mutin, middle linebacker, started a good chunk of the 2019 season when U of H kind of went youth movement. And I think you saw the Cougar run defense get demonstrably worse when he was gone. I'm not saying that U of H would have beaten UCF head to head when the two schools played last year, but not having Donovan Mutin for that one and the Knights just absolutely gashing the Cougars, I think the two were at least somewhat related. And I think having him back, having him, voted as a defensive captain, despite being still fairly young guys compared to a lot of his teammates 2 years in a row, I think tells you what kind of impact he had. And Dustin alluded to it earlier, but moving Deontay Anderson, who just has a ton of experience starting safety, who looked really good kind of auditioning for the role in the New Mexico Bowl held in Frisco against Hawaii. He looked really good playing in a new position, and is joined by Giovanni Stewart, who was kind of in a safety linebacker hybrid role, started some at linebacker under Holgorsen at West Virginia previously. So between Mutin, Anderson, and Mutin, Anderson, and Giovanni Stewart, excuse me. The Cougars have a ton of experience, and I think it's going to be a really good linebacker group, even considering you have a couple guys in there that didn't start at the position.
Yeah, I'll throw one guy at each level, and that Sam didn't mention, but Sam did a pretty good job of it there. But defensive end DeAnthony Jones came in as a really highly touted JUCO transfer a year ago. Only played in I think 3 or 4 games due to just kind of some lingering issues. But when he was on the field, was an absolute menace, and the pass rush was just in opponents' backfields pretty frequently. I think he's going to definitely push for some time. And then at the linebacker position, you got a third-year freshman by the name of Manny Nunnery, who is maybe second only to Logan Hall in terms of just the rave reviews that he is getting this offseason for the new level that he's taken to his game at, and just getting called athletic freak and who can just play all over the field and that kind of thing. So he's someone that I think it's going to be hard with the 3 guys Sam mentioned, likely to be the 3 starters at the linebacker position. It might be hard for Nunnery to get a starting job, but he's going to be one of those guys that you're going to see him coming off the bench and hopefully for years to come.
And of course, you did mention, a statement of proof type of season is kind of what you were hoping to see. So, what are your expectations based on the schedule this year? What do you think? Where do you think Houston lands record wise?
Yeah, I think Houston is going to be a much improved team, and I think the schedule is incredibly beneficial. Houston gave up 32 points per game defensively. You kind of alluded to that. Every team that scored more than that is off of the schedule this year. Every team that's 4 of the 5 teams that scored fewer than 32 points are back on the schedule. And just I think the Houston avoids UCF and Cincinnati in conference play. They get USF and Temple, the 2 probably biggest gimme games in conference on the road. If they can take care of those 2 games on the road, you're 2-0 in conference, and you got 4 of your 6 remaining home games at home, none of them against a team that's just dramatically better than you. So I think there's no excuse for Houston not to win 9 games at least, I would say, in the regular season this year. And as much as it scares me to have optimism about Houston Cougar football, given the last number of years, I think it'll happen. I think Houston will win 9 or 10 games in the regular season.
I would agree with Dustin there. I'm expecting around 9 wins for this team. I'm not expecting this team necessarily to be a conference contender, but the schedule is quite friendly. And I think it kind of is a contrast to when Holgorsen got here, that 2019 season. It was going to be a difficult season regardless, but U of H drew nearly all the good teams in that league. You had Oklahoma in non-conference, a compressed schedule to start that season, and now UH gets the opposite of that, a schedule with not a lot of really exciting kind of draw matchups. I think we like playing Texas Tech as a former Southwest Conference foe, another school in the state, but I think you don't get a lot of real big name opponents, but you get a lot of games that I think the staff should be expected to win. I mean, that's not to say Tulsa and SMU aren't good teams. They both had, I would say, noticeably better teams than U of H last year, but they're not games that U of H can't win. Ditto for Tulane. UH ran Tulane off the field last year, but it's going to be entirely different there with Michael Pratt coming back for his sophomore year, playing the game in New Orleans. So it's not to say every single game on the schedule is a gimme, that there's no quality opponents there. But, I think I looked at the average SP Plus ranking of 2019 in the preseason of this season. I think it was U of H's average opponent in the 2019 season was around 46. U of H's average opponent in the 2021 preseason ranking is about 86. So significant difference there. And the kind of schedule, kind of like Applewhite's last year here in 2018, where if you go 8-4 against it, you're not going to get necessarily a lot of excitement from the fan base. Now, I would say if U of H goes 8-4 against this schedule, and teams like Tulsa and SMU and Tulane show themselves to be quality top 40, top 45 kind of teams, I wouldn't say the season's an abject failure, but it's certainly not the kind of season where a so-so record will be judged kindly against.
Of course, you mentioned the old Southwest Conference, and of course that brings to the mind of realignment. What do you guys make of the Big 12 changes with Texas and OU leaving, and how that might impact the American?
I would say from a personal standpoint, I find it extremely funny. I mean, in some ways, in an existential way, it is kind of terrifying. We all have kind of, as fans here of schools that aren't in the Select 5 conferences, the thought of a bunch of those schools just breaking off and, never acknowledging us beyond the same way that we acknowledge FCS teams is kind of a terrifying thought, but it's kind of the direction we all knew the sport was trending. So for me to see a bunch of Kansas State and Oklahoma State fans be like, oh, this is terrible. Can you imagine us not being considered for the postseason? It's like, yeah. That really sucks, doesn't it? That's not really enjoyable when, you play a whole season and you're not even given a token consideration for the sports championship. It really stinks, doesn't it? and in a number of schools that also I don't think were very kind to U of H during the last realignment dog and pony show. But I mean, it's unfortunately not surprising. I think it's the end game for all these big conferences, or at least all the big conferences that have a viable product. I think Big 12 certainly accepted from that group, as we saw from Oklahoma and the school in Austin deciding to go to the SEC. Yeah, I don't know if super conferences are the future. I don't know what I think college football is going to look like in 2028 or 2029, but I certainly know it's going to be something a lot closer to a stratified kind of thing where the biggest schools make the most money and the biggest schools do everything possible to, I think, shove to the side those of us that aren't part of their club. And as frustrating as that is, as much as I enjoy seeing the remaining 8 Big 12 schools kind of flounder and wonder about their future, I think it doesn't change, I think, certainly what I thought the direction of the sport was going, because it didn't seem, even when they announced the 12-team proposed playoff, I have a hard time conjuring up a future where the sport of college football is more equitable and invites more teams in, to the fold to play for the sports postseason and to get the big money and all that stuff.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is that my just inherent Cougar pessimism has me convinced that the Pac-12, ACC, and Big Ten are all going to hold still. The Big 12 remaining 8 is going to have just enough cachet that it raids the top level of the AAC as opposed to the other way around. And then the Texas schools lobby against taking U of H. And then U of H is somehow now not even in the 6th best conference anymore, because what's left of the American would likely not be as good as maybe the Mountain West and or a rising Sun Belt at this point. So that is my doom scenario. And as much as I agree with Sam on the laughing at the Baylors and the Kansas States of the world, it is at the same time. It's like, yep, there's no guarantee that Houston is even in the 6th best conference as they are now, when this all shakes out.
I'm not just saying this because you're a UCF guy, Jeff, but I think it's significantly more likely the remaining 8 Big 12 schools would want UCF to be a part of their conference than U of H. Just I think that is just how much enmity there is from the 3 Texas remaining Big 12 schools towards U of H from the Southwest Conference days.
It is definitely going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. And of course, you guys host the Scott and Holman Podcast, so please shamelessly plug your fine endeavor.
Dustin, you're our shameless plug guy.
All right, so my shameless plug is that Sam and I are the original University of Houston Athletics podcast, entering our 7th season now. Wherever you get your podcasts, you can search the Scott and Holman Podcast. It is, of course, spelled PAWD Podcast. I think you'll find it even if you just search it as is. But either way, Scott and Holman Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. We're also obsessive over Twitter users. So if you're on the Twitters, follow us at SH Podcast. And of course, that's the same fun spelling of podcast there at SH Podcast.
All right, outstanding. And I enjoy both of those as well. And Dustin and Sam, as always, we appreciate you being on the show.
Thanks for having us, Jeff.
Yep, thanks.
And we'll be right back to preview the Tulane Green Wave with their play-by-play voice, Corey Gloor, when the AAC report continues in a moment.
If you haven't figured it out yet, I love Tijuana Flats. I would love them even if they weren't a partner with us on the Nightline Sports Network. They have all kinds of great Tex-Mex food, and it's fresh, by the way. Made to order burritos, tacos, enchiladas, chimichangas, quesadillas, bowls, nachos, and taco salads. And if you haven't tried the queso, you are completely missing out. It is the best queso that I've ever had in my life. Absolutely hands down. And the sauce bar that they have, everything from wild to mild in there. Absolutely awesome, awesome stuff. Not only do I love the food at Tijuana Flats, but I love the company, a UCF-born company. And they give back to the community with the Justin Queso Foundation. So head to your local Tijuana Flats. Tex-Mex for everyone. Hey Jeep Wrangler owners, have you ever sat in your office at work and watched the rain just pour into your Jeep because the weatherman said that there was a 0 chance of rain? Or you put your doors back on because there was a 100% chance and then not a drop of rain fell? Well, there's a company out there that can help take the worry away and give you the peace of mind to be without your doors. The company's called Life Without Doors. They make waterproof rain curtains and dash covers for Wranglers. Life Without Doors is there to help make the decision to leave the doors at home an easy one. Find out more at lifewithoutdoors.com.
Spice up your company with homemade marketing services from Tasty Gravy Creative. Tasty Gravy serves up a menu of budget-friendly marketing, graphic design, and public relations services customized to your specific goals. Co-owned by a UCF graduate, Tasty Gravy can help refresh your brand, strengthen your online presence, or reinforce your company's message. Contact Tasty Gravy for help with your website, social media, marketing, advertising materials, and more. Visit tastygravy.com.
All right, time now to check out things in the Crescent City with the Tulane Green Wave. Joining us now is their new play-by-play voice, Corey Gloor. Corey, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Jeff. Pleasure to be here.
Yes, and of course, you're not unfamiliar with Tulane because you've spent the past few years as the play-by-play voice at East Carolina. So I guess you were in the transfer portal, I guess it would be safe to say.
A pretty quick dip into the transfer portal after ECU baseball came to an end last spring. Tulane approached me, and a couple weeks after that, I was down here in New Orleans. It was a very, very tidy, speedy process.
Well, congratulations on the new endeavor, and of course, as we look at Tulane going into this season, 6-6 last year, 3-5 in conference. It's hard to believe Willie Fritz is already in his 6th year there, and you can see that the program has steadily increased and gotten better during his time there. I think last year, it's impossible to grade any team with what 2020 threw at everybody. So what do you see as they go into this season? Where would you say their state of the union is?
Yeah, I think they're coming into this firmly believing that this is the deepest group that Willie Fritz has had since he's been here. And because of that, the most talented team that has been here in New Orleans for, frankly, some time, even before Willie Fritz was here. There have been plenty of dark days prior to Willie Fritz's arrival. And what they have now is, frankly, every position you look at, they have depth. They trust going further than just the top guy at pretty much any position. And that might seem like a minor thing for other programs around the American, around the country. But for Tulane, it has been a very steady process to get to this point. And so they're heading into this hearing a lot about the 3 straight bowl game appearances, which is the first time that's happened here. But they're kind of sick of hearing about that now because it was a 6-6 year. And you're right, the year was weird, but they left some wins on the table last year. And it was, getting to 6 or 7 wins the years prior in those bowl games. They see more this year. They see more on the table for them to grab and to take advantage of. And so despite what I think the polls would say, and what we've seen the preseason here in the American, this is a team that firmly believes that they're in the upper group of this conference heading in, just talent-wise. And they're ready to flaunt it here.
Well, let's talk about the offense. They got a new offensive coordinator coming in Chip Long. So Willie Fritz has, been known for having a good running attack. But will this now be a more open offense under Chip Long?
I think they want it to be. I don't know if they'll push the issue to make it so, but I think they feel they also have the weapons to do that. And Chip Long comes in with a really great track record of working with quarterbacks and also working with tight ends. And so when Long came over, the ears of Michael Pratt certainly perked up, and this tight end room really got excited about what might be on the table for them, because tight ends have been kind of part of this offense in years past, but not as much as I think they probably will be in 2021. The running game is going to be there. It's one of the deepest groups on this team. But now with what Chip Long might be able to bring to the table with year 2 of Michael Pratt as the starting quarterback, and with some true skill position weapons around him, I think they think that this can be a balanced attack and one that can also control a pace of game as well. If they want to slow it down, they'll go to the horses in the running game. If they want to pick it up tempo, they trust Pratt and now this group of skill players and Chip Long's offense to move the ball quickly.
Let's talk a little bit about Pratt. 20 touchdowns against 8 picks last year, ran for 8 touchdowns. So he brings that element with his legs as well. So definitely having a new offensive coordinator with a chance to progress. Can you give me your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the thing that I've kind of noticed here in camp and now practice heading into the season is that one, Pratt's taken charge as leader of this group. That's been very evident from the first time I was around this team. He's an extremely vocal and emotional leader, and even not just with the offense, just with the team. But I think you're going to see, you mentioned the kind of the little bit of the running attack that he had last year. Most of that wasn't necessarily by design. He's just a mobile, athletic quarterback. I think you'll start seeing that worked into the playbook, getting him on the move and into space and maybe just taking off on his own, getting more option reads in there for him. Willie Fritz comes from an option background, and so that will always be part of this in some capacity. I think they're able to really open things up a little bit more for him in terms of using his legs. And if that continues to have the success that I've seen heading into the season, then that will allow the 20 touchdowns through the air to continue to build and move forward, because there are some really good wide receivers on this team that have got to hang on to the ball. That was a huge problem last year, but they have the talent to do that. Plus the tight ends that we talked about before. This can be a multi-attack offense here with Pratt and the legs that he can provide.
And you mentioned the receiver group. They've got such great depth there, as you mentioned, and all these guys returning. Deuce Watts, Jaquan Jackson. Give me your thoughts on this group.
Yeah, I think it's a group that has heard plenty about the drops they had last year. There were some big drops from this team, and I know we're going to talk about defense here in a second. That was a real sore thumb for them at times last year, but if these receivers are able to hang on to footballs with more consistency last year, it's not a 6-6 year. Like, it is a better year than that. But Jaquan Jackson is one of the most talented, versatile guys that you're going to see in the conference. And having him as your main slot receiver threat, and Deuce Watts with his twin brother Fat as well lined up wide. Fat's had a great camp, and he was probably the biggest victim of the drops last year. He's had a really good camp heading into this year. And then you add in, there's a transfer coming in from Central Missouri, Shea Wyatt, that has really looked sharp heading into this season. They really like what he could do as a wideout target as well. And then YG Booker, who is kind of a running back. Now he's doing a lot of slot receiver work in practice here, and he's been terrific in wherever you put him. So now there's a group, there's a deep group here that I think that, and Jatavian Tolles is a guy that I hadn't mentioned yet. He kind of rounds things out, where you have some versatility, you have some size, you have some speed, and you can put these guys all over the field. And so it's going to allow not just these guys to hold on to the football better, but also do a lot with their skill set. That you can put them in a ton of different spots.
As far as the running game goes, what do you see in that with that group?
A four-headed attack. Like, it can be 4 deep here. Cam Carroll is getting some early accolades right now. He's a a bruiser of a running back. And then Tajay Spears is going to be good to go. He missed most of last year with a torn ACL, and that allowed Carroll to step into the fold. Eventually, there are a couple of guys left the running back room, but they feel they're even deeper now, even with some departures. Tajay Spears is a good in-space guy, can really break loose on you if he gets to that first level. And then Cam Carroll going to knock some guys around. That's a really good complement to each other. Then they bring in Devin Brumfield from Utah, who's a local guy. He's from the area. And he's kind of a mixture of the two. They've kind of gotten him out in space a little bit. They've got him out in flat routes, but he's a bowling ball. Like, he is a bowling ball of a human being. And so I think there's a lot of things they can do with him. And then Iverson Celestine is beneath him. He's come on late here in camp, and to the point where Willie Fritz has said that he's probably going to see some time here and be worked into this fold pretty regularly. It's a 4-deep group. And then YG Booker might get some time and running back as well. So it's aside from maybe a linebacker, it's the deepest position this team has.
And of course, we know it all starts up front. The offensive line last year, I would say, they struggle with a little bit with pass protection and penetration into the backfield. What are they doing to try to shore that up?
Well, the whole left side of the line plus the center, Sincere Hainsworth, are back. And so you got Joey Claybrook at left tackle, Corey Dublin at guard, and then Hainsworth at the center. And they feel great about what they are going to be able to do on that side of the line. Right side has been a competition in camp, very publicly a competition here in New Orleans. And they have rotated a lot of guys into there to the point where right now, there hasn't been, I think, clear-cut answers just yet. I'm sure the coaching staff has a couple guys in mind, but the right side of the line is going to be, in my mind, the key to this whole offense in the first couple weeks of this year, because it's up for grabs. And even after a couple of scrimmages, it still might be somewhat up for grabs here. So however the right side of the line shakes out and how they perform is going to dictate a lot here in the early going.
Well, let's switch over to the defense and talk about their counterparts of the defensive line, which was very good last year, among the best in the nation in tackles for loss and in sacks. They do lose a couple of players in Johnson and Sample, but they still seem to have some pretty good depth there.
Yeah, they're not concerned about losing those two, which is hard to fathom when you lose the all-time sack leader in the school's history, and Patrick Johnson, and Cam Sample goes with him to the NFL. But Angelo Anderson, a young guy in his second year, a local kid again, he's been maybe the guy in camp. He's been sensational at the D-line spot. Jeffrey Johnson as the nose tackle, he's slimmed down a little bit. He's now under 300 pounds, so he's become a lot more mobile for his size. They bring in a transfer from Memphis, JoJo Dorsey, as he has run over plenty here in camp to line up on the D-line spot. Then that joker position is kind of Darius Hodges right now to take over for Patrick Johnson, but they've cycled in some guys there as well here in camp. They feel great about this defensive line, and that's been, of the positions here in camp, that's been the one that's really stood out to me, of just not just missing a beat, but even improving from last year.
Yeah, and boy, if they improve on what they did last year, that's saying something. And they've got some pretty good guys behind them in the linebacking core. Dorian Williams was a leading tackler on the team last year. Give me your thoughts on that position group.
Yeah, Dorian Williams, the leading tackler, and he barely started. Like, he was usually second guy off in place of Kevin Henry or Marvin Moody. Those two guys are back, and then Nick Anderson is there as well. He was second leading tackler on the team, and he barely started last year. And then the linebacking group goes even a little bit further down. Mandel Eugene's look very good, and kind of that third string. They think they can go 6 or 7 into that linebacking core, and everybody to a man in that position group has been a monster here in August heading into this Oklahoma game. So the front seven that this team is putting out there is as good as anybody in the league. And I think they're very much ready to show it here starting on the 4th.
Yeah, and you look at the secondary, and that's got to be a position group that has to benefit because the front seven is so good. Because if you have a pass rush and you can shut teams down from running the ball, that presents a lot of good opportunities there for the defensive backfield.
I think they're crossing their fingers. That's what's going to happen here. They got some talent back there, but this was the real sore spot in the team a season ago. They gave up a ton of big plays, and it cost them truly cost them wins against Tulsa, against Navy, late in games they couldn't hold on Hail Marys, on third and forevers. And so Chris Hampton comes back for the defensive coordinator role now. He was the D-backs coach here for a few years, left for a year, now he's back, and he's still working with the secondary, and that's his real point of emphasis here, is to get that locked down with Jalen Monroe, really good cornerback that's got too much over his head last year. Then they bring in Lance Robinson from Kansas State to kind of be on the other side in the cornerback role. They really like what he could potentially bring to this team. And Macon Clark, the safety, you can also play nickel back. He's been one of the stars of camp for me. And so as kind of the last guy back there, he has really shown some stuff to me here in the last couple of weeks. So they've heard it. They've heard all of that about what happened last year and how it cost them wins. And now with Chris Hampton here running the show, I think they're ready to turn the page and what I think are capable of doing this year.
And of course, you mentioned from the outset for the season, they start off with a doozy with Oklahoma, but it is a home game, and I guess they won't be guilty of looking ahead to Morgan State. And that's
No, they're very much keyed in on week one. That old adage, or the most important game is the next one. Well, it in spades here.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what do you think for this season? Are they going to be able to break that 6-7 win threshold as far as 2021 is concerned?
It's a fascinating topic here because the question I get asked a lot around the city is, how do you think they'll be this year? And I think this team has the potential to be really, really good, like better than the 6-6, 7-5 mark that they've been kind of bouncing around here over the last few years. They have the chance to be an 8-win, 9-win team with the talent that they have. The next question I always get is, but what about the schedule? And this schedule is brutal. There's no question about it. With Oklahoma, and then you got Ole Miss week 3, you got UAB in week 4, who is not to be overlooked. And then Tulane was picked 7th in the preseason poll in the league. Well, they see everyone above them in the top 6 there. They see Cincinnati, they see UCF, Houston, SMU, Tulsa, Memphis. They see all of those teams. They only play 2 teams from beneath them. And so it's going to be a daunting challenge for this group. But this team, in my mind, built to handle this more than other teams in the past. Moving forward, there are a lot of quote unquote Power 5 teams on the schedule coming into New Orleans. This has been a real imperative point for the athletic director here at Troy Dannon to bring in Oklahoma, to bring in a Kansas State coming up next year. And then the conference has become so much deeper than it was when it started that there's no let-ups. And so this is really going to test the mettle of this Tulane program. This group is deep enough and talented enough to handle it.
Yeah, and you've seen this from your time in East Carolina, because even if you throw out the out-of-conference schedule, the conference schedule is daunting year in and year out.
Yeah, I mean, after you get through non-conference play, Tulane goes to East Carolina, which will be weird for me, no question. But
you got to go to the correct booth, right?
Yes, that's going to be a problem. But they go there week 5, and then they start going through those top heavy hitters in the conference. A Houston Thursday nighter, SMU Thursday nighter. They go to UCF shortly after that. They got Cincinnati for home or for Halloween weekend here in town, but they don't get a real let up in the schedule until probably USF comes in towards the end of the year. And so, yeah, if you're able to get out of non-conference, 3-1 would be exceptional. To get out of non-conference, 2-2, I think is the baseline in my view to get out of those first 4 weeks of the year. You still have a ton of work in front of you. But what the flip side of the coin is a Tulane team 3 years ago, I think would have a lot of trouble with what's to come on their schedule this year. This team, I think they can handle it.
Yeah, and we saw what Tulsa did last year. So there is room to make that move, especially if you got a defense that can help carry you.
And Tulsa lived quite a charmed life last year, and they took advantage of it, no question. I mean, the Tulane game, double overtime, it was a win in Tulane's hands, and they couldn't stop a Hail Mary. The East Carolina game, I heard plenty about from Tulsa's point of view. Like, And now, someone's got to grab that mantle, right? Well, Tulane might need a good break or two to come their way to move into the top 4 of this league, but I think talent-wise they can do it.
Yeah, when I look at other teams in the conference, you look at teams like SMU and Memphis who have been annual contenders, but they're changing quarterbacks and they're having to replace 2 really good quarterbacks.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the door's there. Like, I think the message that we started our interview with that is just going around this program is, yeah, we've had some success here of late at Tulane for what Tulane has been in the previous 20 years, frankly, but it's not good enough anymore. Like we can be so much better than that. And yeah, Memphis and Tulsa have to do, and SMU have to do a little bit of readjusting as to how they'll operate this year. And those are the teams that were picked right above Tulane. You look beneath them, and East Carolina is getting older, and they're kind of in that mix now. Maybe they can then move their way up a little bit, and then you get down to USF. Can they figure things out with the second-year coach? And there's a lot of, I guess, the bottom starting to come back up here in the American, and that's going to open the door for someone here to really make a charge. And Tulane and the folks here believe it could very easily be them.
So as you've gotten to know Willie Fritz, and again, as we mentioned, 6 years there, they have, wrapped him up with an extension, and, what he's brought, stabilizing, not just stabilizing the program, but actually getting it upward momentum. Give me your impressions of Coach Fritz.
The first time I met him, it was a little bit hard for me to believe this. I was talking to a Division I college football coach, because he's such a genuine guy. Like what you see on the sideline, what you see from him in interviews from afar, I mean, that's who he is. He's just a true, honest, down-to-earth Kansas kid who is leading. It was become one of the best coaches in the country, and now is getting the recognition for it. These guys love him. He loves this program. And the way he goes about operating it is not what you get in a lot of other places. He'll get on guys. He's a head coach. He will get on guys. But this is a true, the term I always use, the word I always use is genuine. Like that, what you see is him. And it can be jarring because you expect almost a switch to flip for a college football coach, the public side and then the private side. Willie Fritz is Willie Fritz, and he's as good as they come, both as a coach and just as a person. It's been a real awesome job for me to come into and work with a guy like this as a college football coach, and work with him, intently and be next to him. And he's let me be around the team a lot and just pull guys aside and talk to them. And it's been awesome. And what he has been to this program, he's given this program, he's given this school some more life in this city. And there's a lost generation here in New Orleans of Tulane fans. They were so down for so long. And what Willie Fritz has done is given that flicker of enthusiasm back. It's not full throat yet. There's still more that this program needs to accomplish here for the folks in this city to really flood back. But it's back on the consciousness here. And people are paying attention, and people see that Oklahoma's coming in next weekend, and they say, Oklahoma's playing Tulane. Really? So yeah. Is it at the Dome? No, it's on campus. And that's what the mindset's changed now here in New Orleans around Tulane. People are back to paying attention to it. And now the next step is ready to be taken. It's got to be from these guys on the field here, or to get to a conference contending mark. Then this city will be back in spades for this program.
And of course, one of the things that Tulane brings to the table, they bring great uniform game with the color scheme. That's got to be a nice little recruiting tool that they can take advantage of. Oh,
that angry wave is something else, isn't it, Jeff? I'm rocking it. I mean, we're zooming this. I'm rocking it right now. It's the first thing I thought about that. And the takeaway beads, like, just give me all of that. I mean, it's. The whole with Willie Fritz, Troy Dannon came in at the same time as the AD here. They have really hit reset on what Tulane was to the people in New Orleans and now nationally. I mean, you look at the social media the last few days, and one of the supermarkets here in town has the green wave, the angry wave made out of soda cases. And so that like no context college football and Reddit CFB put that out there, and it's getting traction. I mean, they have the best logo in the game. And now they got the color scheme as well that comes with it. It's pleasing on the eyes, and guys are excited for it. You mentioned the recruiting thing. It's a great recruiting area. And now they're getting, they're always pretty good at getting guys to stay local here at Tulane, but that's really accelerating. Like, that's really picking up where guys who are here in the Bayou want to come here to Tulane. They aren't necessarily always seeking to look elsewhere, which was the case before. Now local guys are seeing what's being built here, both image-wise and just product-wise, and they say, I got to be a part of it. And that's great to see.
Well, and I'm sure plenty of excitement for you as you get to be part of it as well. And if you could, let the folks know where they can follow you on social media and where they can catch streaming of Tulane athletics.
Yeah, if you go to Twitter, I'm at Corey Gloor, CoreyGloor. I believe that's also how I'm at on Instagram if you want to find me there. But Twitter is probably the best place to find me. And then I think we're changing the digital side of things in terms of streaming. We're switching to a new app called the Varsity Network that's going to be coming out here next week. So keep an eye on that. And that's where you can listen to all Tulane athletics. I can't imagine many UCF folks down there in your neck of the woods will be jumping in just full bore. But for those around the conference who want to hear how Tulane handles this non-conference schedule to come on over and take a listen. I'd love to have you.
Sounds great. Well, Corey, thank you so much for your time, and we wish you the best this season.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it. We'll be talking.
That's going to do it for this week's show. As always, please follow me on Twitter at JeffAllen_88 and the Nightline Sports Network as well at UCF_Nightline. This has been the AAC Report only on the Nightline Sports Network. I'm Jeff Allen. Thanks for listening.